Losing fat is going to make you faster, no doubt. But losing weight generally might make you slower if you're losing more strength in the gym than you are kilos on the scales. So how do you know if you're becoming a lean, juicy piece of steak meat or you're just turning into a half-eaten spare rib? You test your body fat. Accuracy guaranteed. Accuracy not guaranteed. Preach! Testify! Tech now promises to measure body fat, but let's be honest. Who's got the time or the money to do DEXA scans, bod pods or hydrostatic weighing unless you're at a university and they're using you like some kind of lab rat? So that leaves the average Tartan warrior with body fat calipers or body fat scales. Now calipers aren't self-administered, so you might need to root yourself out a fitness professional to do the test, and often that's the stargate where personal trainers meet athletes. Now it's the rage that personal training, trying to mimic science, is offering all types of services to improve their offering, and athletes, well, they just like to measure stuff. And in that search for objective truth, health and performance conscious people get sucked into the personal training dimension. Testing is now the big seller, but the prerequisites of testing are that it's verifiable and repeatable, while accuracy, well, that seems to be a little bit more subjective, and I think that can be pretty misleading. Now, yeah, while there's always the caveat that the PT could just use their common sense when looking at the results of the test, what's the likelihood that in a scenario where the client has paid for the service and the service has been provided, that the PT is going to use that common sense? I mean, what's the chances that if you followed the protocol, you've done the measurements 3 times in the right places, you've got your calculator out or consulted your book, that in the end, if the result comes out just blatantly wrong, that you're going to say, you know what, that's rubbish, just ignore it. You're more likely to say, whew, yep, surprising, but what am I going to tell you? Can't argue with science. So what causes that? Firstly, there's an enormous amount of user error that's built into these procedures, but you tell me the professional that's going to admit that the user error is theirs. Not me. Secondly, the client's paid, and so therefore, conceivably, he's paying by the minute. So if you spend 10 minutes doing body fat measurements and then dismiss them all on common sense, you're going to give him that 10 minutes back, all the money? See, basically, people don't like to admit that they're wrong or incompetent, and so they hide behind the machine or the process. When you admit fault, it's weakness leaving your mouth. In these consults, you're trying to build trust, but also demonstrate expertise. And while in theory it demonstrates far more centeredness and expertise to be able to discount the results and the payment too, in reality, the fragile ego is in a toss-up between the gadget's wrong or the user's wrong. There's no winning answer. If the gadget's wrong, then why are you using something so inaccurate? I mean, what's the point of using a gadget that gives you the wrong information? Information is only useful if it leads you to a better conclusion. Now, I live in Wales, so if I say the best way to get to London is to head west, that's useless information. The fact that you'll eventually reach London, having successfully circumnavigated the globe and probably be richer for the experiences on the journey, doesn't change the fact that that information is useless. Useful information is head east. If the range for healthy body fat is really so small, in men 13 to 18% and in women 20 to 25%, and this range is constantly disputed, but that's another issue. But let's just say that's the range, and the plus or minus error on the machine is 5%, that means the range for men is now suddenly 8 to 23, and for women is 15 to 30. And that means that the machine range can well give you duff results. So let's just say that you're a guy that wants to get faster, and you think you're at 8%, but really, you're at 13%. That's going to have a marked effect on your training and your nutrition. And if you're a girl at 25% and you've just measured at 30%, then you've gone from being a healthy body fat level to overweight. Now you're on a diet that you don't need for a condition that you don't have. The same sort of thing happened when the BMI was first introduced. Deciding that the normal range was 18.5 to 24.9 meant that a whole bunch of people went to bed considering themselves to be normal, woke up the next morning and were considered overweight. That's some heavy sleep. They all had to start dieting, kicked off an industry. Now hopefully you're doing the test for two reasons. Firstly, to get a baseline and track progress, and secondly, to get more information so you can advise better. But if you're using the test to get you a better picture of what's going on, but the picture's wrong, your advice is going to be wrong. So now you're really just using the test as a benchmark to have something to compare to the next time they redo the test. Accuracy be damned. Because as long as the results are consistently inaccurate, then at least they're demonstrating the same thing. If the graph is 1 to 10 and then it goes up to 20 to 30, then as long as it goes up, I guess it's all good. And if that's your game, then you just better hope that your lack of accuracy is made up for by consistency. Because if those two variables are out, you're just scribbling numbers on a page. If that's the case, then I just assess body fat like this. Look, let me think of a number between 7 and 50. Add 5, take 4, divide by 2, times 3. Take away the number that I first thought of. Yep, that's your body fat level. So what about self-administered? Take ownership. You're the boss. Get your hands on a set of body fat scales. Tech at your control. Well, circuits made in a factory by the lowest bidder's control, but that's just details. Here's a story on that. A friend of mine was on a weight loss kick, and to monitor the improvements, purchased a top-of-the-line digital scales that spat out a bunch of different numbers. Body fat, water, bone, muscle, weight. They knew that while the figures might not be 100% accurate, they'd be consistent weigh day to weigh day. They tested this with repeated weighing on one day to get an average. The scales were internally consistent with no real variation. So they knuckled down to the training and the food monitoring, scales gleaming in the corner. 2 weeks later, hopped back on the scales and the numbers were exactly the same. No difference. Now, alright, possibly these scales only showed those numbers, but Occam's razor, sponsored by Gillette, says the simplest explanation is, you ain't lost nothing. Take your heavy hooves off me. And that sent them into a funk. I mean, what's the point of doing all this sacrificing if there's no overall change? Luckily, being an analog child, they'd also decided to use a low-tech cloth measuring tape too. When they remeasured with that, the losses all came out of hiding. There was shrinkage in all the right places. Just because you have high tech, don't think that's the only way to detect your improvements, or that it'll always reveal your gains. So for sports people, how do you measure whether you're losing body fat or muscle without all this nonsense and expense? I've cross-referenced the weight on the scales with your vertical jump and your full pull squat or your power clean. If jumping stays the same or gets worse, you're losing muscle. If you're losing proportionately more on the barbell than you are on the scales, that's hurting your strength and power to weight ratio. And if you're losing weight and your vertical jump goes up, that means you're losing body fat. Now there's a lot of reasons why it's not really as simple as that, like neural innovation, but that's about as good as it's going to get in this video.
And it won't ever get that good again.
Psst, forget that. I've got the greatest offer ever. The new 25-point caliper test as featured in the new edition of Men's Health. 25 points. It's used by the guys in NASA. Come on. Maybe I can throw in a free crack wax. I hope this helps. Bust me a thumbs up, because let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good. Chit chat away in the comments bay, and if you like my vibe, please subscribe. Life is vital on early origin. Or,